Today's video is about common watercolor mistakes. First up, you're using the wrong paper. All of the mistakes in this video are easy to correct, but this one is the easiest. You've got to use actual watercolor paper. I'm attempting to paint a quick sketch on thin drawing paper here, and you can see right away that it can't handle the water. It almost instantly becomes saturated and gray, and then it starts to get wavy. It's hard to paint on wavy paper because the paint wants to pool in the low areas, and those pools make the paper even more fragile. They might even create holes. When I was a teenager, I spent a summer painting on drawing paper because that was all I had on hand. As hard as it was, I still loved watercolor, but once I started using actual watercolor paper, it was so much easier. Why make painting any harder than it has to be? Watercolor paper isn't that expensive and you'll have a much better time with it. This is what the drawing paper looks like when it's dry. Permanent wrinkles, and the paper becomes almost crispy. Next, you aren't using tape. I'm adding a lot of water to this paper. And this is watercolor paper, so it can handle it and it's not turning gray. But once I'm finished and let it dry, it will become warped. So you need to tape or staple or otherwise attach your paper to a board before you start painting. Here's the paper after it's dried for a while. I've heard of people successfully ironing paper like this to make it flat again, but that seems like so much more work than just taping it down to begin with. You can use masking tape for small pieces like this one. I use tougher brown paper tape when I work on bigger paintings. Next problem, your drawing is too dark. If you look closely, you'll just barely see the pencil outlines of a face here. This is how dark I usually draw, but most beginners tend to draw the way I am right now, pressing down in places, using a variety of line thicknesses, and maybe even adding a little shading. All of those things make a good drawing, but they're not necessarily useful for watercolor. I draw as lightly as I possibly can, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now, some artists love the look of watercolor paintings with visible pencil lines, and if you're into that, go ahead and draw as dark as you like. But if you think you'll want to get rid of the pencil lines later, you'll find that erasing will be more difficult than you might have imagined. And if you're using a dark pencil, even a number 2, the graphite can smear and affect the color of your paint. By the way, I'm painting this on a watercolor block. Their sheets of paper are attached to each other in a big chunk. They're a little more expensive, but they eliminate the need for tape. I've let the sketch dry, and now it's time to erase a couple of lines. I'm not sure why, but once you've painted even a little bit of watercolor over a pencil line, it doesn't want to erase, and I'm pushing down hard. You can even see my table shaking. Not fun, so that's why I draw lightly. Another problem, you're using the wrong brush. Maybe your brush is the wrong shape or size, or maybe it's just in terrible condition. I'm painting a medium-sized eye with a 3/4 inch flat brush, something I would normally never do. I would prefer to use smaller round brushes for this eye, and while this big brush does a good job with the skin, its shape is awkward for the iris and pupil. Plus, it holds a lot of water, and that makes me feel like I don't have much control. I did not have fun with any of these paintings. It's such a pain when you purposely make things harder for yourself. This brush is actually my favorite. Its bristles are fuzzy and destroyed, but they help me paint textures like fur and grass. But it's useless when I have to paint exact shapes, and I'm fighting it every step of the way here. Do yourself a favor and buy a few watercolor brushes in different shapes and sizes so you'll have the right brush for the job. And I can't say that I hate the way these eyes turned out, but they're a lot looser than I normally paint. Sometimes I envy painters whose work is fast and splashy, but that's just not me. Finally, let's talk about water problems. If you load your brush with too much water and paint, you'll have less control. I'm trying to stay in the lines here with a super loaded brush, and it's hard. The other problem is using too little water. The paint won't flow smoothly, and you'll need to make lots of sketchy strokes to fill in an area. You might create streaks or have white specks. Try to find a happy medium. I hope you found this helpful. 10 more tips are on the way. Thanks a lot for watching.